Gyruda, Doom of Depths offers the perfect shell to help us empty our opponent's decks while also bringing back the biggest and best creatures for us to take down the competition. Hello everyone and welcome to another Commander Tactics Deck Tech. My name's Pope. With Ikoria Lair of Behemoths and Commander 20 both right around the corner, it's time that we dive into all the new legendaries that we're going to be able to brew around as soon as they drop. Today we're going to be building around the Dimir Demon Kraken Gyruda Doom of Depths. I think this could be pronounced Gyruda, but for the sake of this video we're going to be calling it Gyruda. Costing 4 Dimir, we get the classic 6/6 for 6. Gyruda has Companion that reads, if your starting deck contains only even CMC cards, you can have Gyruda as your companion and can cast it from outside the game once. And Gyruda says, when Gyruda enters the battlefield, each player mills the top 4 cards of their library into their yard. Then we can select any even CMC creature that was milled this way and reanimate it to our side of the board. Gyruda is no companion for this deck, but the general of the mostly even army. With the incredibly powerful ability to cheat out big, powerful, even costed creatures, that will be the primary focus for this deck. But with that same ability, we also will be making everyone at the table mill in the process. So with the two synergies combined, we're going to be leaning into a mill strategy. And lastly, we really want to hammer home some big ETB effects to work with Gyruda, so we will have a full arsenal of bomb entry abilities that will be looking to copy and recur. And our budget for this whole deck, not including the lands, comes out to about $200. But now let us journey into the belly of this beast, kicking things off with our creatures of the Even tribe, starting with a few smaller yet powerful utility creatures in our Chaomancer, Baleful Strix, and Lazav the Multifarious. Each of these 3 creatures is going to help us get what we need when we need it, and very cheap so we can hardcast them and not waste Gyruda's ability on it. But if we do use Gyruda and they come out on top, that'll be okay too, we can just cheat those in. Our Chaomancer is going to let us get an instant or sorcery card back from our graveyard whenever it enters the battlefield. Baleful Strix offers up flying and death touch, but also lets us draw a card whenever it enters the battlefield. So not only is it replacing itself, but it also offers a cheap line of defense. And then Lazav the Multifarious, blue, black, 1/3 legendary shapeshifter. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to surveil. So we can look at the top card and either put it in our graveyard or put it back. Then we can pay X and make Lazav a copy of any creature card in our graveyard, where X is the CMC of the creature we want it to become. With so many super strong effects, Lazav being able to just transform into those creatures whenever we need to is extremely powerful. Not to mention we can do it at instant speed, so if we need a huge blocker in the defense step, well, we're able to do that. Next up, we have 3 even boys that are huge bombs that we definitely want to grab whenever Gyruda comes down. We have Rexiol the Risen Deep, Vilis Broker of Blood, and Tidespout Tyrant. Rexiol the Risen Deep, costing 3 blue black, legendary Kraken, 5/8 body, has Island Walk and Swamp Walk, so there's a good chance it's going to be unblockable no matter who we're hitting. And whenever Rexiol the Deep deals combat damage to a player, we get to cast an instant or sorcery from that player's graveyard without casting its mana cost. If that card would be put back this turn, exile it instead. The great thing about Rexiol is that with Gyruda in combination, we're going to be milling our opponents and be able to get some of their best instants and sorceries, making it a super powerful creature. Then we have Vilis Broker of Blood coming out of M20, 5 and triple black. This 8/8 demon has flying, but he also has pay a black, pay 2 life, and give a target creature -1/-1 until the end of turn. And whenever you lose life, you draw that many cards. You know we're going to be able to draw a ton of cards by cheating Vilis in, and then we're going to have a handful of answers ready to go and just be able to dominate the board. Vilis is definitely a target that will get taken out quickly though, so we want to try to cheat him in as fast as possible. And Tidespout Tyrant, 5 triple blue. This flying Djinn, 5/5 body, whenever you cast a spell, return target permanent to its owner's hand. Tidespout Tyrant is an absolute monster, and if we get it out early, it will absolutely secure the victory for us because we can just start bouncing all of our opponent's lands. And then of course, in the world of big monsters, where could we go if we didn't go into some Eldrazi? And that's why we're running Kozilek the Great Distortion and Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. Kozilek the Great Distortion costs 8 and 2 generic. Says whenever you cast Kozilek the Great Distortion, if you have fewer than 7 cards in your hand, you get to draw the difference. Unfortunately, we won't be casting Kozilek most likely if we're cheating him in with Gyruda, but he does have Menace, and he has the ability to counterspell things simply by discarding cards from our hand with the matching CMC. And Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, most expensive card in this deck, has the even CMC, and whenever we cast him, we get to exile 2 target permanents. There's a chance we could just be casting him later in the game, but really having a 10/10 indestructible body that also exiles the top 20 cards of an opponent's library whenever he attacks is insane. Of course, being in the mill strategy, Ulamog gonna ramp that up to a whole new level, making 20 cards go away whenever we need him to. And speaking of milling our opponents out, we have a full arsenal of creatures, sorceries, enchantments, you name it. We're going to be casting spells to make our opponents mill each turn for any action that we or they take. Let's take a look at some of the creatures we're going to be running, starting with Murkovosk, Mind Drinker, Consuming Aberration, and Finax, God of Deception. Murkovosk, Mind Drinker, 3 blue-black, so can't be cheated off of Gyruda, has flying, and whenever he deals combat damage to a player, that player reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal 4 land cards, and they put all the cards they revealed into their graveyard. 4 land cards is a lot, so there's a good chance whenever Murko hits for some damage, we're going to be milling our opponent for quite a bit. And then we have Consuming Aberration, another odd-costed creature that we can't cheat in, but he has power and toughness equal to each of the number of cards in our opponent's graveyards. That's not one opponent, that's all opponents. So this thing is going to be a monster the moment it comes down. And it also has whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals the cards from the top of their library until they reveal 1 land card and then put all of them into their graveyard. This is great because it's going to hit all of our opponents at once. We don't have to go to combat. All we have to do is just play spells on top of Consuming Aberration. And Finax, God of Deception. This god, 3 blue-black, again, can't be cheated in, but we can still cast it and get that mill value. Has Indestructible. If our devotion to black and blue is less than 7, it's not a creature. And it says, creatures you control, so all creatures, can be tapped to make a target opponent put the top X cards of their library into their graveyard, where X is that creature's toughness. With over 25 creatures in this deck, we can get Finax down, he won't be able to be destroyed, and then we can just start turning our creatures sideways and emptying our opponent's decks. And then next up, a few more creatures that we're going to be running to help mill our opponents. All of these will fall in the even category, so they can be pulled off with Gyruda. Circio, Dimir, Lobotomist, Una Queen of the Fae, and Dreamborn Muse. Circio, for 2 blue-black, legendary human wizard, says whenever you play a blue spell, remove the top card of a target library from the game. Whenever we play a black spell, do the same thing, and your opponents can't play non-land cards with the same name as a card removed from the game with Circio, Dimir, Lobotomist. This is an extremely powerful effect with any blue or black combo spell we might be casting, such as, I don't know, Una, Queen of the Fae, and that second ability where they can't cast non-land cards with the same name is relevant, because if we can get to exile a Soul Ring, a Farseek, a Cultivate, things like that, there's a good chance multiple opponents will have them in their deck. But moving on to the queen herself, Una, Queen of the Fae, 3 and triple Dimir, has flying, 5/5 body. We can pay X and Dimir and choose a color. Target opponent is going to exile the top X cards of their library, and for each card of the chosen color exiled, we get to create a 1/1 fairy. The tokens aren't really what's relevant. What is relevant here is that we can be able to just mill somebody for all of our mana. Late game, this can absolutely hit somebody for a ton. And to top it all off, we can do this multiple times because we don't even have to tap Una to use this ability. And then we have Dreamborn Muse, 2 in triple blue. This spirit says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, so this will affect us, we are going to put the top X cards of our library into our graveyard, where X is the number of cards in our hand. I love Dreamborn Muse because it's one of those creatures that doesn't really feel like that big of a threat, and no one's going to want to use removal on it, but it can do some serious damage to those players that love to have giant hands the whole game. Then next up, we have a couple Ashioks coming in. Ashiok Nightmare Muse coming straight out of Theros Beyond Death, and Ashiok Dream Render from War of the Spark. Both these Ashioks are going to help manipulate the graveyards in play. For 3 blue-black, Ashiok Nightmare Muse says for +1, we can create a 2/3 blue and black Nightmare creature token. Whenever this creature attacks or blocks, each opponent exiles 2 cards from the top of their library. Great mill, affects everyone. Then for -3, we can return a target non-land permanent card to its owner's hand, then that player exiles a card from their hand. Or if we can get to the -7, we can cast up to 3 face-up cards your opponents own from exile without paying their mana cost. That -7 probably going to be pretty tough to get to, but all we really care about is those 2/3 nightmares getting in, blocking, attacking, and milling everyone for 2. And then Ashiok Dream Render, 1 Dimir. Spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause them to search their library. But the big thing is that target player is going to put the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard, and then we get to exile all of our opponents' graveyards. We're going to be milling our opponents a ton this game, so whenever we do that, we want to make sure we're not enabling any decks. So thanks to Ashiok, we're going to exile everything in their yards and get rid of any threats that might be there. And then next up, we have a couple enchantments going to help us get the job done with Psychic Corrosion and Mind's Dilation. Psychic Corrosion, 2 in a blue. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent mills 2 into their graveyard. Of course, very powerful. We're in blue. We're going to be drawing tons of cards, and this is going to help us get all of our opponents milling all at the same time. And then Mind's Dilation, a card I love so much. It is so fun and does help reduce the deck size of our opponents. For 5 blue, this enchantment says whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, that player then exiles the top card of their library, and if it's a non-land card, we just get to cast it for free. Mind's Dilation will absolutely get a lot of eyes and shade thrown your way, but guess what? It doesn't matter because we're going to be stealing all of our opponent's stuff and casting it for free. And then rounding out the team, we have our artifacts, Altar of Dementia and Altar of the Brood. Both of these extremely cheap artifacts. Altar of Dementia says sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. This is great because it's a free sack outlet. There are creatures we may want to die at particular times, and Altar of Dementia will enable that. And then Altar of the Brood says whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent will put the top card of their library into their graveyard. This includes lands, this includes creatures that we cheat out. Everything that we have coming onto our side gonna trigger Altar and mill all of our opponents at the same time. And then the last artifact in this deck, Keening Stone. This 6-cost artifact may be one of the biggest bombs in this deck. For 5 mana, we can tap Keening Stone, and target player is going to put the top X cards of their library into their graveyard, where X is the number of cards already in their graveyard. So if we have been able to mill that opponent, or they've casted down to where they have over 40 or 50 cards, there's a good chance we can Keening Stone them to death. The downside it is that we can only hit one person with it at a time, and it does cost 5 mana to activate, but it can absolutely win games. And then the last part of this deck that I did want to take time to talk about was all the amazing ETBs we're going to be running and how we're going to abuse them using different spells to copy them and make them come back over and over again. 2 artifacts that can help us get that done are Panharmonicon and Strionic Resonator. Panharmonicon may be one of the best artifacts ever printed. For 4 mana, if an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of any permanent we control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. This is going to make ETBs trigger twice. This is going to make our Altar of the Brood trigger twice. So many of our permanents are going to benefit off Panharmonicon and just enable us to double down and get things moving even quicker. And then Strionic Resonator for 2 mana, 2 to tap it, copy target triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Triggered abilities in this deck that we really care about, well, I don't know, Gyruda number 1. We can double up on that mill and recursion of a creature. or any of our things that require a combat damage or combat step, we can copy those abilities and get the added benefit. And of course, one easier way to really get those ETB effects going, we can just blink our creatures using cards like Thassa, Deep Dwelling, and Deadeye Navigator. Both of these going to be able to get off of Gyruda's ability, so we can cheat them in for free. Thassa, Deep Dwelling, 3 and a blue, indestructible. If our devotion to blue is less than 5, she's not a creature. And at the beginning of our end step, we get to blink one of our creatures, and then for 4 mana, 3 and a blue, we can tap another target creature. In a very realistic scenario, with Gyruda's cast and entry, we get to bring Thassa in for free. At our end step, we exile Gyruda, bring it back, and then we get to get something else onto our field for free. Super strong, awesome card for this deck. And Deadeye Navigator, we all know it, we all hate it, but we all love to run it. 4 blue, has Soul Bond, so we can pair it with another creature whenever it enters the battlefield, or when Deadeye Navigator enters the battlefield. As long as Deadeye Navigator is paired with that creature, we can pay 1 and a blue to blink that creature and then return it right back to the battlefield. The 1 and a blue activation is an extremely cheap price to pay, especially if we pair it with our commander and we are able to just get tons of big beasts into play and get awesome effects over and over again. And of course, we do want to make sure we have a good selection of even costed creatures with good ETB effects, and that's why we're running things like Gonti, Lord of Luxury, Duplicate, and Jace's Mindseeker. Gonti, Lord of Luxury, 2 black, says whenever it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library. Exile one of them face down and put the rest on the bottom of that library. For as long as that card remains exiled, we can look at it and we may cast it and spend mana as though it were any color to cast it. Gonti's ability is one of my favorites. It gets the table involved and our opponent's never going to know what we stole until we slam it down on the table. And Duplicate, removal on a creature, 6 CMC. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to exile a target non-token creature. As long as the card is exiled with Duplicate, it's a copy of its power and toughness and creature type, but it's still a shapeshifter. Multiple uses of Duplicate can really go a long way and can help us secure those wins. And then Jace's Mindseeker, 4 double blue. Whenever it enters the battlefield, target opponent puts the top 5 cards of their library into their graveyard, so we're getting that mill going. And then we can cast an instant or sorcery from among them without paying its mana cost. Multiple blinks of Jace's Mindseeker means we're going to be milling a ton and then getting to cast tons of instants and sorceries. Any of these effects with Panharmonicon or Thassa already in play means we are just going to get so much value off of that one creature's entry. And the last 3 spells I did want to talk about with this deck are 3 of our alternate win conditions with Laboratory Maniac, Jace Wielder of Mysteries, and Thassa's Oracle. Being that we are going to be milling everyone out, and I mean everyone including ourselves, we want to make sure we can't lose the game if milling ourselves happens. So that's why we run Labman and Jace. Both of these spells say if you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead of losing it. This is imperative because it might actually become one of our paths to victory depending on how things are shaping. And then we have Thassa's Oracle. This new addition from Theros Beyond Death is extremely powerful. For only blue, whenever Thassa's Oracle enters the battlefield, so we're getting another awesome ETB that we can use over and over again, we look at the top X cards of our library, where X is our devotion to blue. We put one of them into our hand, and the rest on the bottom of our library. If X is greater or equal to the number of cards in our library, we win the game on the spot. Thassa's Oracle is an extremely broken card, gonna do a little bit of everything. We're gonna scry basically, we're gonna get a card draw, and if we can recur that ETB, we will most likely just win the game. I did want to take a second to talk about these 3 cards real quick though. Some playgroups are kind of against alternate win conditions such as this. It's real easy to combo off with Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation or things of that nature. So if this is not something your playgroup really likes or wants to deal with, just take these out. We can still win by milling our opponents out or just outvaluing them with all of our free creature casts. Don't feel like you have to run these 3 cards just to make this deck operate. But now we've seen the ins and outs of this deck, let's take a look at what else we got going on inside the 99. Our removal and control in this deck looks very strong with 11 removal spells, including creature ETBs that we can recur, so a great arsenal. Card draw and advantage, 16 spells. We're in blue, we're going to have a ton of ways to draw cards, and it's one of our great ways to make our opponents lose cards. Our ramp being only in blue and black, a little difficult, so we're running lots of mana rocks. And the power level of this deck, I have put it at a solid 6. I think it could even drop down a little bit further. Milling opponents out is one of those things that is extremely hard to accomplish, but in the end we are running a ton of powerful creatures, so we can definitely get it done. We have 3 strong lanes for winning with this deck. Number 1, Gyruda, our commander. We're really honing in on that ability and going to be able to cheat in some huge bombs, and that's going to enable us just to outvalue our opponents. If that doesn't do it, we're going to try to mill them out. We're going to make their decks disappear and win by making them have nothing to draw. But in the end, if that doesn't get it done either, we have our outs with our own mill strategies using Labman and Jace to draw out our own deck and win the game thanks to them. A few budget alternatives for this deck include Geth, Lord of the Vault, Extract from Darkness, and Manic Scribe. Geth has that even CMC, so can be cheated in, but also has the ability to reanimate creatures and artifacts and mill at the same time. A great include if that's the direction you want to go. For 3 blue-black, Extract from Darkness to Sorcery, each player is going to mill the top 2 cards of their library. Then we get to put a creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. And Manic Scribe 2 CMC, so we can cheat him out. Whenever it enters the battlefield, each opponent's going to mill 3, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in their graveyard, they mill another 3. Great help to milling out our opponents. And a few upgrades you might toss in if you're looking to soup this deck up: Consecrated Sphinx, Clever Impersonator, and Snapcaster Mage. Consecrated Sphinx, 6 CMC, so that beautiful number. Whenever an opponent draws a card, we get to draw 2 cards. This is so powerful, one of the best abilities ever printed, and it's going to enable us to mill our opponents out a little bit quicker if we have the right cards in play. Clever Impersonator, 4 CMC, again perfect. We can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield, so if we've got a powerful artifact or enchantment, Clever Impersonator can come in off of Gyruda and copy them. And then Snapcaster Mage, I normally wouldn't put this here, but it is only 2 CMC, so we can cheat it in. It has flash, so if we want to cast it from our hand, we can do that. But really, the number one reason I added Snapcaster Mage is because it's become so cheap. We're in a weird time right now, and it is down to almost below $30. If you have the funds available, you might consider picking one up, but Snapcaster Mage is one of the most powerful spells, again, ever printed. But hey, that is going to do it for this Dimir deck tech on Gyruda, Doom of Depths. Gyruda is an awesome commander. I can't wait to get my hands on him. I have wanted to build a mill deck for some time, and I think this is one I'm very, very interested in. Hey, let me know what you thought of the deck down in the comments section below, and if you like this video, make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing if you aren't already. If you're new here, thanks so much for checking out the channel, and if you're a subscriber already, thanks for coming back. If you're a Twitter user, head on over there, drop us a follow at EDH Tactics. New video every Friday. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, stay inside, and we'll see you for the next one.